This week, we are going to cover at least two topics. One is Angular, and the second is React. So Monday, Tuesday, we're going to talk about Angular, and Wednesday, Thursday, it's going to be React. And on Friday, I'm planning something if it works out good. Otherwise, we are going to continue on one of the UI development topics. The reason we did not focus a lot on MVC or developing UI using the MVC views and view components is because I didn't want to bombard you guys with front-end development technologies. Because front-end development and responsive design is becoming so popular, I wanted to restrict it to using uh, one of on these two leading frameworks of application development. So I'm pretty positive that you have already heard what Angular is. But then before we talk about why Angular is required, I want to talk about HTML first. So HTML is a hypertext markup language. A markup language is going to add extra information to the text, to the information that we want to transfer. And because of this markup, we will have better luck in interpreting. We will have, we'll be able to interpret the data in a better way. HTML is okay. By documentation, it says that it is case sensitive, and a general HTML document is going to look like this. Head element is going to have body element, and inside body, we're going to have multiple tags, say an h1 tag, and that's my name here. So the information in this h1 tag, Zia, it is some data that we want to transfer from the server to the browser or to the client. And then this tag here, this markup here, h1, it becomes an instruction for the browser about how to render this information. And then if you compare it to the regular XML intention, XML is created with assigning meaning to the data. So the data itself in our example was somebody's name. That name by itself means nothing. But then when you add markup to it, this information start making sense. If you compare this with the HTML document, HTML is hypertext markup language, and hypertext means that the text that we put inside this document, it is going to have some extra behavior to it, like an href element, right? A hyperlink is going to navigate you to a different document on the internet, right? It could be on the same website, it could be another website, but the text here is going to react differently. So HTML has a different purpose than XML. XML adds markup so that the information start making sense. HTML adds markup so that that behavior has some hypertext behavior, right? But then the information that we are passing around, it kind of loses its significance, or it becomes difficult for the reader of the application to understand what the intention was, where the information was coming, because in most cases we don't have hard-coded information. Like the data does not appear here in this format. The information itself is going to get generated from the server side, and it gets transferred to the backend and where it is rendered in the HTML format. Now, to make to combine the intention of XML with HTML, we'll have to replace these HTML tags with other custom tags, and those custom tags, they are going to depict the information, process the information in a better way. So the HTML, that information displays like this. We are going to change these tags to say author and author over here. Now, anybody who is looking at this document, even if they don't have much of development background, they would understand that this information is for the author, right? Now, let's look at another example of, say, a product-based application. So you have, so this is the product page. Now, the product page itself is going to have multiple listing. say a filter element over here. This filter is going to have a text box and a button here. Now this button, um, when you click on this apply button, whatever information that you put here, the product listing page on this side that was displaying, say, a couple of rows, after this information, it is going to get filtered out and we are going to see fewer results. Now, if you remember our discussion on atomic design from HTML, I would go ahead and start breaking this page down into different. So the elements that we saw in the atomic design, let me go ahead and pull that up real quick. All right, so the first was atom. Atom is the smallest unit. It cannot be further broken down. Multiple atoms combine and they create a molecule. These molecules combine and they create an organism. And in these organism, this is where the chemistry terminology ends and we have template. And then based on these templates, we create pages. Make sense? So on a page, we'll have to identify the template. These templates, they'll be created using different HTML building blocks. All right. So let's go ahead and identify. Let's go ahead and break down this page. This particular thing here probably is the heading of the application. Right. This is, say, a filtering component, and this is the main component of the application. Right. This is where the data is going to appear. Now, as we are building application, this example here is pretty straightforward. I'm going to copy this once again. I'm going to paste it here. And this time I'm going to say the first piece of information that I want in my application is a heading. The second information that I want is filter. Excuse me. And the last information that I want on page is main, right? These are not standard HTML tags. These are custom tags, but then because of the way they read, like heading, filter, and main, you will get an understanding, an idea about what this application is doing. The way we're going to create heading itself is we are going to write special code, and that special code eventually is going to use these native HTML tags and attributes, right? So if I want the heading of product itself to appear like pretty big, I'm going to use a heading tag there. If I want that this information here probably provides an option of adding element to the cart, I'm going to put an href or an anchor tag over here, and then this anchor tag is going to become part of the main component itself. Right. So what we have done essentially is we have applied multiple designing principles like atomic design. We atom probably is a button. Atom probably is an input text box, a label like filter, which cannot be further broken down. We combined multiple atoms to create a molecule, such as a filter option, right? So it has three important elements, or probably we created um, a functionality that when you click on this button, it is going to give you part of the information. Now we combine a label, an input, and a button to create an organism. This organism is going to give you some form of filtering functionality. We combine multiple organisms and create a page template. Now, this page template includes three different functionalities, and then multiple such pages, they're going to create an HTML application. So through this, our designing is going to improve. The original intention of XML of adding a markup language and assigning meaning to information that is served, and eventually the way we want to transfer information from the server side to the UI, that is going to get taken care of through these elements. Right. So this is the This is the core concept of Angular, that you don't want to use direct HTML elements inside. You want to break them down into different consumable templates, and these templates, they're going to form your HTML document. And what happens inside these templates and these organisms, it'll be defined inside different type of file. So with that, let's formally introduce Angular. So Angular is used for writing single page applications. It has multiple building blocks like components. Then we have template, then we have directives, and we have dependency injection. Right? Dependency injection we have already seen in different forms, not for Angular, but we already know what dependency injection is. Now, a component is a TypeScript class that is going that is responsible for generating the view. So it is going to have a component is going to have a template. It is going to have a couple of classes. Just one second. Right. And it is going to have some metadata. Right. This metadata is going to provide some information about how these multiple elements they are supposed to be bound together. The template itself is going to have the HTML elements inside them. So different tags that we want in our application, we're going to define them as part of template. Next, there's going to be directive. A directive is going to give instruction to, is going to transfer data between different components, and it is going to give control of what kind of elements we want to display. So one directive that I can introduce at this moment is ngIf. If in a certain way you want to influence which element to be displayed on the screen, which should not be displayed, we are going to use ngIf as a directive. This directive is going to control if the element can appear on the screen or it cannot. Right? There are multiple directives that are available. We're going to talk about them. Dependency injection, the way a component is responsible for generating UI for the screen. Dependency injection is for non-UI activities. Non-UI activities, and we are going to inject services inside these components. A service is going to do all the backend activity that a component requires for gathering the data, for doing some form of calculation. All the activity, all the logic of the application, they are going to be part of the services. The component is going to consume these services, and the way a component and a service is linked is through dependency injection. This DI concept is the same thing as we saw in the .NET Core classes, where in an Web API project, we injected a service for consuming data through, say, a unit of work pattern or through Entity Framework Core. So the concept is exactly the same, uh, but then the syntax and there are going to be more nuances of the Angular programming itself. So with that said, I am going to fire up um, Visual Studio Code, and probably I should talk about I can talk about JavaScript, I can talk about TypeScript, or the tooling that is required for this. Okay, so let's start with JavaScript. Now, we have already seen that for declaring variable in JavaScript, we have only three options. One is let, one is the var keyword, and the last is the const keyword. Now, const is going to generate a variable. You can assign a value to it, and that value cannot be modified after once it has been initialized. Right? Okay. The let keyword is a better way of declaring. Give me 1 second, guys. Right. Shailesh, Shailesh, can you please turn off your camera? Right. And then, guys, please make sure that you are you're not um, you're on mute if you don't have anything to speak. Right. Thank you. So, all right. So let is a way of declaring a variable, and then it limits it to that particular block. Var is var also declares a variable, but then all the var elements they get pulled up through hoisting and they get defined, and they don't have a block scope. Their scope is a little longer than that particular block. So we know that JavaScript has these three ways of declaring variable. We also know that JavaScript is statically typed language. A statically typed language, it does not require you, broadly speaking, to declare a variable's type. I am so sorry. It is not statically typed language. It's a dynamically typed language. So a dynamically typed language does not require you that you declare the variable. It is okay for you to write a statement like this, and then the next statement could be this. And then a dynamically typed language is completely okay with it. So the burden of managing these things of what the type is and what information we are saving, and when we are passing it to different UI elements, it is transferred to the developer of knowing and tracking this information. And there are a lot of advantages to a dynamically typed language. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have static languages or statically typed languages. A statically typed language, it is going to complain when we write a statement like this. And they're going to complain that this variable is not defined. And JavaScript has options to this. Like in JavaScript, there is a directive called use strict. And then with use strict, excuse me, with use strict, a lot of such errors will be highlighted at compile time, and it would frown upon you declaring variables in this way. You will have to define the variable in the beginning before you start using it. So JavaScript has options for that, but even then, it won't stop me, my best guess, from doing this kind of assignment. So there is no type level control, and that's why there is language called TypeScript, and TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. Right? So every JavaScript file that you can think of is a valid TypeScript file. And TypeScript, it has options of defining type. So JavaScript has like 4 or 5 basic types, but then you don't have to define the type as you're declaring a variable. But then TypeScript, it says,
So there's a screen lag from your end, so I think so.
Zia, you are mute.
I am so sorry. All right. So TypeScript is going to make you define the data type of that variable. The syntax is going to look like let, and then you define the variable name. You put a colon sign, and then you put the data type of that number. Put the data type of that variable, and then optionally you can initialize that variable as well. So let's go ahead and pull up this page. All right. So this is the official TypeScript website, typescriptlang.org, and the variable that we declare, right, is going to appear in on the screen. So as I said, that every JavaScript file, it is a valid TypeScript file as well. And then notice that it has one line added already to it, which is use strict. Now, if I type any TypeScript code here, this application here is going to generate the equivalent JavaScript file. We know that we can define anything as any all the valid JavaScript file, they are valid TypeScript file as well. So this statement is perfectly fine. If I do var z, it is going to get translated to the JavaScript file right away. But then the advantage of TypeScript is defining data types. So if I define a variable a with the data type number, it is going to get translated into JavaScript as let a. So JavaScript has a remove type because JavaScript doesn't have type. And with this, if I assign this value, notice that it is assigning the value in the equivalent JavaScript file to the variable. But when I assign it a different data type, I get error. Right. One thing to note here that TypeScript, even if there is an error on the type side, TypeScript doesn't stop from transpiling the file from TypeScript to JavaScript. So if I write the statement, it is going to complain that type string is not assignable to type number. Right? Means we are assigning a string to a number, right? And it doesn't like that. It is complaining about that, but then it still went ahead and generated the equivalent JavaScript, right? This is this is the first thing about TypeScript. That TypeScript is, even if it complains, it is going to translate it into an equivalent JavaScript file. It is the same error message that is going to appear on the side. Let's go ahead and take a couple more examples. So I can declare a const and call it um, available. I'm going to assign type as Boolean and initialize the value to true. Then notice that the data type once again has disappeared. It is const available assigned to true. Now I can declare variables as well, arrays as well. So let me go ahead and do that. Let numbers assigned to have to put number over here, number array, and over here I can type 1, 2, 3, 4. And once again, the data type is gone, but we know that numbers here is a collection. Now, when you initialize a value, you don't have to specify the type. I can very much get rid of this. And when I do numbers assigned to 20, once again, it is going to complain that the data type is not interconvertible. We are assigning a number to an array. Moving on. Okay, defining functions in TypeScript is almost is the same as that in JavaScript. But then let's go ahead and look at a definition of a function. Say we do a multiply function, and this multiply function is going to perform some activity. So the conversion is once again equivalent. Now, if I do console.log and call the multiply function's result, okay, it is going to call this, but then this function is supposed to have a return type. So say if I do return 10, right? it is not type safe anymore. Let me go ahead and comment this code out. And if you want to specify a type, I'm going to put a colon sign and specify the return type over here. So the way to accept value in JavaScript is that we take parameter 1, parameter 2 here like this, but it is complaining that we have not defined a type at the moment. Right? JavaScript is fine, but we can define the type here as number, and probably this one is a string. And then because we have defined a function and we are not passing any value, JavaScript is not complaining, but then TypeScript is saying that please pass a value over here. And that value could be 1 and hello. Now it is fine. If I play around with this thing and assign it to this variable, like change it to number, once again, we're going to see type error, which JavaScript won't show you. So let's go ahead and put hello here again. And I'm going to declare a variable. Let's call it value. And I'm going to assign 10. JavaScript would internally convert this to an integer if we do say var x assigned to 10 plus, right? So this is a valid statement in JavaScript. We have already seen this, that it's going to get converted to number 10 and then x is going to have 20 after this result. And just to verify, I'm going to do console.log and x, and there's a run button here. When I run that, so x is already defined somewhere. Let's change this to y, and let's change this to y. So I'm going to comment out these lines. And there's one more error. I'm going to comment out this. And then now if I run it, it is printing 1010. So it converted probably this 10 to string, and then it did concatenation, and then it printed value of y. All right, and this console.log is coming from the second 10 is coming from this multiply function, this return value here. But if I put a plus sign in front of value, probably this thing is going to become a number, and the error has kind of resolved. So if I pass say 10 here as string, it's going to complain. If I pass value here as string, it's going to complain that I'm assigning a string to a number. But then there is an easy way of converting strings to numbers, and that is with a plus sign. So if I plus sign, it is like if you are familiar with C programming, it is type conversion to an integer type. You're not going to you're not going to use that. You're going to use the plus sign, and through this plus sign, it is going to convert the string to a number, right? And the errors have resolved. So these are like some of the TypeScript basics you should know. I'm looking for one more example, which is about, okay, so I want to talk about classes. I'm once again going to switch to the JavaScript extension or the JavaScript tag. And over here, I'm going to define class and person. So TypeScript gives you an option of defining classes. Now, because we are using ECMAScript 6, we are going to see class keyword in JavaScript as well. In the older version of JavaScript, probably there was not a class version. Okay, I'll have to really recollect, but then there are classes available in TypeScript, and these classes, they get converted to JavaScript equivalent. Now, if I declare members inside these classes, like say first name, I'll have to start with the let keyword and give a data type here. Okay. I don't know what it is complaining about. First name has no initializer. Okay, because you are defining a member inside a class, you will have to initialize it to a value, and that value, it is okay to have null over here, or probably okay to have an empty string over here, right? So members of TypeScript, they need to be initialized inside the class function. And notice that the value that we are adding here, they are transpiling into a uh, different um, construct. Like a class, we are initializing in C like property like syntax, and it is becoming part of constructor because JavaScript has no equivalent way of doing this. I Okay, I have another option of defining private variable here, like last name. Once again, I can leave it empty, but then private is just a syntactic sugar. In fact, TypeScript itself is syntactic sugar. It is going to give you familiar options of the object-oriented programming languages, and it is going to convert all the TypeScript to an equivalent JavaScript file. Notice that this private, if I declare a variable person p assigned to a new person, right? If I do p dot last name, it is going to give me a compilation error that this variable is private, but the equivalent, once again, the equivalent JavaScript code is already generated. And if I put my last name, I don't know if it is going to let me run that code. Let's give it a shot. Okay, so it is printing it. Right? So the point that I'm trying to make is these values here that we see, they are only here, they are only for the developer. It is only for developer, and the equivalent JavaScript is not going to honor this private keyword. Okay, I'm going to comment this code out. And the last thing that I want to show you is an interface. So the interface concept, once again, is the same as the C# section that we have seen. And if I want to have first name here, I've forgotten how to declare a variable here. Give me 1 second. Interface. I'll probably have to give it some type, say string, and it's okay to not initialize these variables here because interface does not require initialization. But if you are looking on the right side, there is no code on the JavaScript side that is generated here, right? Because interface is only for identifying contract between two entities, two activities. They are defined in TypeScript, but there is no equivalent JavaScript that is generated for interfaces. We are going to use interfaces in our Angular sessions, but understand that interfaces, they are not going to have anything in the JavaScript world. Starting Angular 2, they switched from writing native JavaScript code to TypeScript, and that's why knowledge of TypeScript is important. As we are going to see more Angular code, you're going to notice that this knowledge is going to come in handy. All right, so moving on. Excuse me. Right. So let's talk about the software that we require for building Angular application. So I'm going to close out of this. All right. So we have already used VS Code very extensively for during the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript week. We're going to continue using Visual Studio Code. So that is the first thing. To generate and run this project itself, we're going to require Node Package Manager. So now, if you don't have this, if you run this command and if you don't see this output, you don't have Node available on your computer. There are multiple ways. Once again, you can go to download Node.js, and this page here is going to let you download the Node software. But then let me show you another command. When you run a command like this on Windows machine or probably also on Linux, and if you see this output, you are sure that that executable is running on your computer. If you want to figure out where that code is running, it is printing it here nice on the output window. But if you if you don't see that location, you can run the which command. So which npm is going to print this particular output here, that it is part of Node.js, right? If you run which node, it is going to once again point to Node.js. So I have Node.js already installed on my computer. You can download it from here, and it is going to come with the npm package manager. By number one, if you are anything like me, you don't want to download it as an executable from this site, and you would probably want to use some automated installer and type Node.js, right? Choco is going to download that package for you. You can hit enter, and it is going to go to the internet, download the package, execute it, and install it for you, right? So we require npm for building Angular application. But so let's just run the npm command. It is saying that where it is present, and it is giving us a couple of options. A little bit of help. Help is once again going to print this, and there's a switch called -l. Let's run npm with that option, npm -l, and it is printing a lot of alternatives here, right? So npm is a package manager, and it can install a lot of packages for you. If you want to build Angular application, you will require a package called ng. You will require an exe called ng. And if I run ng here like this, it's going to say that there are multiple commands available. If you want to see where ng is installed, you can hit which ng. And this command is going to say that in my home directory, in the app data roaming with npm, it has installed this ng package, right? To install this package, we are going to go to this website, npmjs.org, and we're going to search Angular. Now, Angular itself is available. Okay, I don't want this Angular. I want the Angular from Google. I want this package here. Right. So it is going to tell you, it's going to give you all the options of or the documentation of how to do the installation, how to use it. So the installation itself is going to run with at least two commands. The first option is install it globally. The second option is install locally. The globally has an extra switch -g, and it is going to install this package on at a global level. So it will be accessible across all the folders. npm install without the -g option is going to install it for a specific folder. Right? It is recommended that you install this package at a global level. Right? So I'm going to clear the screen, paste the command, hit enter. It's going to go to the internet, it's going to download the package, and after it is done, we will be able to run the ng command. All right, so after running this command, you will get an option of ng, and it is going to display you this information. Right, ng is saying Angular CLI requires minimum Node.js version of this and or this. Please update your Node.js version or visit this. Now I'm going to run the help command. Let's come back to the documentation, and ng help. I was hoping that it's going to print some different output, or ng help. Right, so when we first ran ng, we saw that, and now we are seeing a different version because probably of the version upgrade. That was a different version, and now I'm not seeing these commands. But let's go back and look at this output here from the previous run. And we have an option of add, analytics, building, deploying, configuring. We have an option of documentation. Opens the official Angular documentation, ng-doc. Notice a little um, one letter inside parentheses here, right next to these command line options. And then they probably appear equivalent. So you can either type ng-doc or you can type ngd. and they are both going to have the same effect. So let's go ahead and do that. ng doc, and it's going to complain. All right, I think it is not liking that my node is not updated. So let me go ahead and update node, chuckle, update node.js, and hopefully it'll get the package and it won't crash on me. I could have avoided this by passing hyphen hyphen force or hyphen y to this, and it would have not prompted me with this option. And if you want to install a specific version, you can change this part of the application here of the command here and specify the moniker for a specific version. It'll fetch that specific version for you. Okay, while we are waiting for this thing to finish, let's go ahead and look at some other commands. So doc is going to launch or open documentation. Then there's a command called generate. It generates, modifies files based on the schematics. This keyword here is very important, schematic. We're going to use this option a lot for generating like most of the component of our application. Help, lint, it looks into your code and it gives you warnings and errors about bad coding practices in your application. The next command is ng-new. All right, looks like our package is updated. All right, so this thing has gotten through. Now if I type ng, all right, it's once again printing those commands. It was probably waiting for the node to get updated. All right, so we were at lint. Lint is going to give you error for incorrect coding practices. Right, new is going to create a new workspace or an initial Angular application. Run is going to run an architect target with an optional custom builder configuration defined in your project. I don't know what that is, but then to start the server, you're going to use ng-serve command, builds and serves your app, rebuilding on file changes. All right, so it's going to start your application, and it is also going to, when you make file changes, all right, it's also going to rebuild the application. You can fire test cases using ng-test, using ng-update. Probably you can update the application and its dependencies. And there's an ng version as well. So start with ng version. It is going to print the Angular version here. Right? The Angular version that we are using is 12.1.1. And then because I saw a little v here in parentheses, I think it should give the same output. Right? Now, I don't like short options because they kind of confuse the reader. So I generally use the full command. We're going to use it for ng-doc as well, and it is complaining that the doc command requires to be run in an Angular project. So we'll have to create a new Angular project, and we already saw that in the help section that ng-new, not ng-generate, ng-new is going to create a new Angular application. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to clear screen with Control L, ng-new, and if I hit enter, okay, because I am already inside a directory. Okay, so ng-new, it went ahead and it started asking me prompt. What name would you like to give to your application? Right? I don't want to run through this. Okay, let's go ahead and call it ng demo. I'm going to hit enter and it is saying, would you like to add Angular routing? The default option generally is capitalized. So if I just hit enter, it is going to take no, I think so. But then let's go ahead and be explicit and choose adding routing to our application. We're going to talk about routing in a moment. Now it is asking which type of styling we want. We are comfortable with CSS. There is SCSS, there is Sass, there is less. Bootstrap is built using Sass. We're going to default to a simple option of CSS. Hit enter again, and it has created a folder called ngdemo, and it is adding multiple files to it. Okay, now it is saying schematic failure, package install failed, see above. All right. New minor version available. npm. Okay, I might have to update npm as well. So let's do that now. npm. I think I should have a command called update, and it'll automatically update itself. Or should go update npm. Right, I'm going to have to figure out a way to update the node package. Node report, CPU. It wants 7.18.2, right? Yeah, install. I don't know if I should run this command once again. Probably. Hmm. We want version 19. So if you scroll through this, I think there is a command for installing npm itself. npm install. Go ahead and run. But it looks for package files. Okay. Right. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, there you go. This command probably should do it. And now it is updated to version 19. Let's go ahead and install. Angular CLI is already installed. We were running ng new command, and we already saw that when we hit enter here, it is going to ask for multiple inputs like the project name and the routing option. So let's quickly skim through this ng demo and why I want routing. I'm okay with CSS. And it is once again giving an error saying found Jasmine Core could not resolve dependency. I'm going to remove the ng demo file. I'm also going to get rid of the package log.json file. And let's give it another try. This time I'm going to pass the ng demo option right here, or probably let me show you the help available on the new command. So new command itself has multiple switches. If you want to override the previous implementation, you can pass ---- force and it's going to overwrite everything. If you want to create very minimal code, you can pass ---- and if you want to prefix your components in a specific way, you can use -p option. I'm going to show you a command with that. For routing, you're going to use this. And because I've deleted that file, I'm going to run it with these new options. So --name, probably I don't have to use the name option here. I can just say ng demo, and then I can pass --prefix and say CS, and I'm going to use the minimal style of coding. Code name, probably the order is wrong. I'm going to say --minimal. I know that you don't pass name with --name. Sure about that. No such file or directory. Let me just go ahead and use this, or probably just fall back to hmm, mkdir angular, cd angular, and then over here I'm going to do ng new once again. All right, something was wrong with that folder. I'm going to Control C and cancel out of this, and let's once again run this command ng demo, and then I'm going to write minimal code, and I'm going to prefix our component with the CS option. And it should ask like only one question about routing and CSS. So I want routing, yes, I want routing, and I'm okay with the CSS. So this time it didn't ask the first question of what the name is because we provided the name here in the command line. All right. So as these applications are built, uh, the Angular CLI, it goes to the Node Package Manager server, what we have already seen here, and it is going to get a lot of packages. One such package is going to be TypeScript. And with this package, the TypeScript code that we're going to write as part of the Angular application, This package is going to get included inside our application, and we are going to transpile the TypeScript file into JavaScript. That's where the packages are going to become or are going to get created, and we're going to send those packages to the browser where the application itself is going to get executed in the browser. So with these packages added, finally, we have some luck in generating our application. Let's do an ls. Ls is going to do the directory listing, and I can launch Visual Studio through here using code and dot. Dot indicates current directory. I don't want to open current directory. I want to open the ng demo directory, right? And if I want to launch the same window that we have open here, I can use the -r option. Or if I want to launch a new instance, I can leave it empty and just type in code ng demo. It's going to give a warning sign. I trust the author, the folder. So the solution file is opened up here. Okay, I'm going to maximize this. All right, so this is the folder structure that got created as part of our ng new command. Right, notice that angular.json, package.json, there's a readme.md file, there's a gitignore file. So if you plan to check in the file, the gitignore is going to list all the files that should not be checked in. Right, there's a browser list. Then there is tsconfig. Ts is short for TypeScript. TypeScript can be configured, and for our application, there's a special configuration file. This is the same. This is similar to app.json or app settings.json file that we have seen in .NET Core. There's a favorite icon. There's an index file, main.ts file. Polyfill is going to provide backward browser compatibility. So with the latest version, this is not required, but if you're planning to run it on IE8, for example, I don't know if it is going to work for IE8, but Polyfill provides backward compatibility with older browsers. There's a CSS file, there's an asset file. There are two environments. One is production, one is dev environment. Then there's the app file, the app folder, and inside app folder, we see app routing, and we see app module and app component.ts file. So now that we have opened this thing in Visual Studio, let's go ahead and analyze the folder structure. Number one, we did not add this node module. This got added because of the package installation command. You remember seeing that it was downloading packages. Those packages, they get added in node modules. Look at the .gitignore file. The gitignore is going to have node modules. When we check in the file, we don't want to check in this particular folder here. So it is part of the gitignore file along with other files. All these settings, all the browser specific settings that you have, we don't want that checked in as well. So everything that you don't want inside git push command to make it to the server, you're going to put it in this file. I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to point you to the most important file, which is package.json file. Now I'm going to collapse all the elements, and notice that it has three sections. One is the script section, second is dependency section, and third is dev dependency section. Now, dev dependencies is only going to they are required only for the development on your local machine. It is similar to having the SDK version of your files. Remember, .NET Core had two versions. One is SDK, one is framework or the runtime. So the SDK version enables developer for writing code. And this is where we have Angular CLI. Now, if you look at the node module folder, you're going to see Angular CLI, ng CLI one more time, at the rate Angular/CLI, right? So this package.json file is going to have list of all the packages that are available over here, right? As process of checking in, we are going to check in this file, right? Once this file is made to server or to somebody else's computer, they can run another command called npm install, and it is going to look for the package.json file, and all the packages that are there, they are going to get pulled and they are going to get added to the node modules folder. So we only have to provide the packages that we are using. We don't have to provide the package themselves, and that's why we ignore those packages. Now, these dev dependencies are required for developer, and one of the dependency is TypeScript itself. For running the application, we don't require these. For running the application, we require core Angular modules. Like one of the module is core, next is form, then there's common. If you want to do animation, there is an animations package, there's an RSJX package, there's a TS library, and there's a zone.js file. Right, in the script section, we have at least four commands: ng, start, build, and watch. Notice that it is this command that we used for building our application, the ng command itself. Start is going to do ng serve. And then we have seen in the help section that ng serve is going to start the server. It's going to show it in the browser. And as you make changes to the file, it is going to accommodate those changes and refresh the UI as well. So ng serve, we can start it with the start command, or we can run the ng serve option here. The ng build option is going to build the project, and ng watch is going to watch it for a specific configuration of development. So that is the package.json file. The angular.json file is going to list information about the project itself, right? So the version is 1. The schema for the project is present in the node modules folder. The project root itself is the project folder here. And this section here, this is a name that we gave when we were creating the application, right? If I drill down, if I ignore these schematics, keep moving forward, the architect option here, there was a command called ng architect, right? So that command here is going to take the input from this side, right? The build process itself, it says that the index file is present in the src folder, um, index.html. So there's an src folder that we see. There's a main entry point, which is src main.ts, which is also part of this particular folder here. Then we have a favorite icon. If you look at this folder here, there's a favorite icon. If I double click on it, the favorite icon is an A with a shield. If I go back to the angular.json file now, right, the global styling is present in style.css. This is CSS because we chose the option of CSS. So again, there is configuration. For development, we have these settings here. For ng serve, we have two options. One is development option, one is production option. With the production option, we are going to set this particular variable here, and it is going to become input for Angular to create a production build. This is for internationalization. If you want to translate your site, you can use this part here. So we already saw two files, file, package.json file. Now let's look at these two files here, index.html and main.ts. So index.html, it has the default HTML body, HTML, head, and inside head, there's a specific tag here called base. So all the URLs that are going to get resolved inside the Angular application, they're going to look for this particular element from the head tag. And if you want all the URLs to look like your domain, something.com/app, you're going to put an app keyword here. We're going to leave it to a slash and not going to put any value here. Inside body, we have CS root. Okay, remember seeing the CS option with hyphen prefix. So my general practice is that I generally put my client's name, such as say Consisti Systems, right? So CS is short for Consisti. If you're building for a specific client, you can go ahead and use that abbreviation, and then root is going to be by default. But then this tag itself, it does not look like the standard HTML tag, right? There is no HTML tag that we saw in our HTML classes or UI development classes so far, right? So there's CS root present somewhere that we don't know yet. So that is part of the index.html, and that's all we have here. In the main.ts file, the main TypeScript file, we have a bunch of import statements, right? Part of it is pointing to the node module folder, angular/core, right? And part of it is pointing to the app folder here under src. So all the code that we're going to write is going to sit inside src, and the packages that we use from the other framework, they're going to be part of this node module folder here. We already saw that there are two configuration. With production, it is going to enable prod. It is going to call this function enable prod mode, and then it has some mechanism of bootstrapping and calling the app module. So we are seeing app module like twice already inside Visual Studio Code, and we have already looked at the angular.json file, project.json file, and the index.html and main.ts file. Now, going back to the index.html, if we pick up this tag, I'm going to hit Control C, Control Shift and F. It is going to search across project, and I'm going to search for CS-root. So it is present in the index.html at two places, and it is also defined as a selector in the application code somewhere. So if I select this file and go back to the Solution Explorer, I see that in the SRC, in the app folder, we see app component.ts file, TypeScript file, and over here we see cs-root defined. So this is the selector element that we are using in the index.html. Now let's look at this folder structure more closely. So in the app folder, we have app.module.ts file. This app.module is present in the main.ts file as well. So there's a bootstrap module, which is pointing to app module. App module is imported from this particular file here. And if I hit F12, it is going to take me to the definition of the file, which is defined here. Now this class is declared a little differently. It is modified with the export keyword. Now the export keyword inside TypeScript file, it indicates that this class is to be consumed by outside applications as well. Right? If I delete this export keyword, hit the save button, notice that it is going to start complaining that this module is not available. So it is not available for import because I removed the export keyword from here. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to restore that keyword. And through this class is available for consumption by other components as well. This class itself is modified with an @ng module function, right? Notice that there's this this directive here. It sits right above the class name, and it is part of the Angular core application, which is called the ng module, and it is taking a JavaScript object. Now, does it look more like a function? So a function has name, and we're going to call that function. And is a special TypeScript notation, which makes it a decorator. So we have modified the app module class with the ng module decorator. And this decorator, it takes a parameter. And if you remember from our JavaScript class, everything in the parentheses is a JavaScript object literal. So this literal here has three variables defined. One is declaration, second is imports, four variables actually. One is providers, which is empty, and the next is bootstrap. Now, one way to understand what each of these is doing, if you press F12 on this, it'll take you to the definition of the element. And the comment here, they're going to give you an exact description. The set of components that are bootstrapped when this module is bootstrapped. The component listed here are automatically added to the entry point. An entry point sits exactly above this. And if you read this, the first thing that you should notice that it is deprecated. Means it is the current version, you don't have to specify this. But let's read through the rest of the documentation. The set of components to compile when this ng module is defined, right? So that they can be dynamically loaded into the view, right? So this thing is going to have components that are going to generate view. And this goes back to our discussion on the whiteboard where we said that we have four things that essentially form our Angular application. One is component, second is template, then directive and dependency injection. The component itself is a combination of template, a class, and some metadata, and it is responsible for view of the application. And now that we are reading through the documentation and coding, it is also saying that the entry components or Bootstrap, it is going to help us dynamically figure out what view is to be loaded. All right, so this, we're going to look at some other option. There's an option of export. There's an option of import. There's an option of declarations, providers. We already saw this property. Let's read through what a provider is. The set of injectable objects that are available in the injector of this module. Have you seen this word injector before? When we were discussing dependency injection, right? So ng module gives you an option of injecting dependencies from the outside. And what are dependencies? So if we go back to this section here, dependency injection is a non-UI code. They are the services. They're going to help us extract data from the server side and probably do some backend calculation as well. So component through ng module, they're going to receive injectable objects inside providers. Okay, let's go back to the app module.ts file. And this app module.ts, we have declarations, where we are defining the app component. We have imports. These imports, they are coming from the core Angular functionality, browser module and app routing module. Then there are providers. Because we don't have any DI at the moment, this is empty. And Bootstrap is going to tell us which is the first component that our application should be loading. And the first component for our application is app component. If I hit F12, I'm taken to the second file over here, which is app component. Now, once again, app component uses an import. It is importing component from the core Angular package. And the component itself, once again, is a decorator, right? This is a TypeScript concept. Component decorator is added on the app component class. The app component class, once again, has an export. Because of this export, we can import this component here in this particular module, right? Going back to the component file, the directive is pretty big. And if I remove this object literal, it is complaining. It's complaining that this constructor here requires at least one parameter, right? When I press F12, because the definition is like pulled out, I can right click on this and say go to implementation, and it's going to open up this package from this node module folder. So I'm inside node module, Angular, core component, and core.d.ts. I hope you remember seeing this file when we were doing the TypeScript language play. Right. So as I type JavaScript here, right, there's a d.ts file that get created, and then it has all the declaration of the TypeScript file. This is also this file is also required if you want to consume a JavaScript file inside your TypeScript file, right? So this is like a package, a metadata package, a reference for another JavaScript file. So d.ts is declarations of in the TypeScript format for a JavaScript implementation. So core.ts is going to have d.ts is going to have all those declarations present here. I can close out of this and once again go to definition of component, or probably let me go ahead and restore the object literal. So the component directive itself, it requires at least one JavaScript object, and that JavaScript object is going to have a selector, template, and style, these three members in it. Let's go ahead and press F12 and go to look at the definition of these. So the selector itself, it is a CSS concept, and it is saying the CSS selector that identifies this directive in a template, right? So we know that there are multiple type of selectors. Dot is going to select a class, hash is going to select an ID. If we specify the attribute name itself like an h1, it is going to become that h1 element, and we are creating custom selectors. So this selector here is going to point to this element, right? The selector that we specified in the app component.ts is cs-root. So it is going to go in the backend the way we have selectors in type in CSS. That selector is going to get applied here, and we're going to select that element. So it is perfectly valid to put a selector of this type, the root element, right? And through this, you can point it to another element, a different way of selecting. You can probably provide a class name as well and call it root class. And it is going to point to the member where we have this as a selector. A good strategy is to leave it to cs-root to the element name itself, right? Let's look at what template is. By the looks of it, this is not a quote, this is a backtick. Inside backtick, we have all the HTML elements inside, right? Welcome to, and then there is title, there's span, there is image, there is some text, there are a couple of links, and it ends with a backtick as well. So the second parameter is a template. If I hit F12 on this, it is going to say an inline template for Angular component, right? Above that is the relative path or absolute URL of the template file of Angular component, right? And then it is specifically saying that do not supply an inline template using template. So if you are using template URL, you don't need template. The same is for style as well. That is going to provide you inline styling. And if you are using style URL, you are not to provide this particular member. Right, I think we have seen all the important files. Let's go ahead and start the application. So I'm going to go to View, choose the terminal option, and over here I'm going to say ngserve. This is what we saw in the Angular command line options. I can hit enter here, but let me go ahead and delete this and take you back once again to package.json file. And there's a script tag present here. And it is saying that if you want to start the application, you can run this command. Typing start here is not going to work, right? You will have to type npm start. And now if I do this, it is running the ngserve command because we have configured it for ngserve. Now it is asking if I want analytics to be shared with Google. I don't want it, so I'm going to say no, hit enter. And it is generating some browser application. So the phase is set up. I think it's a multi-phase process. Probably the second phase is bundling, then sealing. And now it is complaining that route outlet is not present. It's not a known element. If router outlet, so somewhere there is an element called router outlet, and it is not finding a definition for that. And it is inside the app component. For now, I'm going to comment this out, right? And as soon as I hit the save button, notice that it has built the code again, and the application itself is available at the local host. If I hit the control key, it shows me an option of clicking on the link. And when I click on it, it opened up this tab for me. All right, I'm going to close out of most of these, and we are not seeing anything here. I'm going to hit F12 and see if there is any error, and we see an error. It is saying that inside code.js live reload is enabled, run.run. All right, ng zone. Right, I'm going to copy this code, copy this error message, and let's see what this is. For the most part, it is saying that if I include this browser module in the ng module, it should be fine. So let's go to our application. In the app module.ts file, we have included the browser module. In the app component, you don't have to include anything here. So we have those packages included already. So in the so we already have the browser module added. Platform open browser is the same component. Okay, I don't know what went wrong, but then probably repasting this line, recompiling it again, it helped. And now we are seeing this application. If I close out of this window, we are seeing welcome to ng demo. There is some default HTML, and there are a couple of links over here. Let me go ahead. I'm just taking a chance. We deleted the router link here. Let me go ahead and restore that, and it compiled as well. And now if I come to this page, it automatically refreshed, reloaded, and we are seeing this application here. Our favorite icon is present here. The URL is 4200 and these links here. Now, if we compare that section with this section here, there is welcome to, and then there is double curly brace, and inside double curly brace, I see title. If I hit F12 on this, it takes me to the app component where we have a variable defined inside class and it is initialized to ng demo. If I change this to full stack development and hit the save button, notice that it compiled again. And when I go to the browser, I already see full stack development here. Make sense? So the value that we are assigning to this member through these double curly braces, it is getting reflected in the UI element. And this is an example of binding. So there are multiple type of binding. This is the first type where we are passing information from the component class into the element itself. Now we already saw that template and template URL, there are two options available. And because we are uh, inside HTML code, all right, in the earlier versions, we did not have this option. We would see no IntelliSense because things were available in line. But then template, it kind of becomes a little cluttered, a little noisy, and I'm not a big fan of this. So I'm going to change this template to template URL, and I'm going to remove the string literal, just simply cut it and call it app.component.html. Now let's go ahead and add this file at the same level as this and say app.component.html, and everything that we copied in those files, we are going to paste it here. If I hit Shift Alt and F, right, there is an option where it applies all the modification or it probably styles the document, and it is still complaining. So I was applying some formatting to this. All right, so in place of template, now we have template URL. I might have to put a dot slash, and now it is pointing to this particular file here, and it's saying app component is not declared. Now if I hit save again, template URL, it should have worked. All right, so it's working now. And if we go back to the UI, there's no difference, and our component itself has cleared up a bit. Now I can come here and define, say, okay, so this tag here, let's look at the UI, and it is inside H1. I'm going to apply quick styling to this component. And to do that, notice that styles itself as an array. Inside array, I can define the CSS classes. For H1, I want background color of red. Right. And now if I look at this code, it is taking this background effect. With this, probably I should also show you the style.css file. This is going to get applied globally. And if I want a specific background, light blue, and if I hit the save button now, this application is the entire body tag has become light blue color. Right? So there are two ways of styling. The first way is modifying the style.css file. The second is you apply some inline styling here in the component file in the styles tag, and the same option is available like template, that instead of providing it in line here like this, we can put it inside a file, and once again name it the same file, app.component.css, and the CSS will have to add it to this folder, call it app.component. I think it takes a while before. So it is style URLs that value is correct, if I modify it, hit the save button and make sure that the names are same, it should work just fine. Let me go ahead and stop this, terminate the job, and let me show you another option. So when we run npm start, it goes to the package.json file and it picks up the start option from here. And gserve has an option called -o. I'm going to put that -o, and now we're going to run npm start. And when I run this, it is taking that effect, ngserve -o. I think because it needs an array here. That's why. Okay. And now that I have loaded this file, I'm going to save it and compile again. And because of the -o option, it is going to launch the browser. All right, one thing that you should notice here, that at build time, it is going to generate a hash. This hash is going to make sure that when you deploy the new application with a new hash, it is going to have a different hash generated with each build, and that is going to make sure that the browser refreshes every time. Otherwise, because of the browser caching, sometimes you're going to see that older implementation of Angular, they are still taking effect. Now, we have this light gray background defined inside the style.css file, app-component.css, and it is getting linked with the module using the styles URLs collection. So make sure that when you do this, you put it in the square brackets. So we have seen the general structure of an Angular application and how to create this application. The Angular CLI option that we used was ng-new, and through this new, we created the entire application with minimal, and we influenced the prefix as well. Now let's go ahead and add another component to our application. Now to create a component, we can replicate this model. Inside app module, we have declaration added for app component. An app component is a class which exports and it is modified with @component decorator. If I repeat this folder structure, or if I start adding a class file like this and call it, say, product component, and modify the CS root to CS product, I'll have a new product, which is going to point to some HTML file. Now, this way is going to work, but then it is a lot of work. And you can avoid this, and you can lean onto the Angular CLI. Once again, I'm going to type ng, and notice that it has a generate option. Now, if I do ng generate, it's going to throw an error, and it says that the generate command requires to be run in Angular project. So let's go ahead and move into the project first. Right, I'm going to do ls cd ng demo, and okay, so the biggest indication that we are inside an Angular project is this file here, package.json. All right, it is probably not angular.json, it is package.json file. So wherever you have package.json file, that is an Angular project. Now I'm going to once again run ng generate, and it did not run because it is expecting further parameters. Now the parameter that is expecting is schematic, and I'm sure of telling you that this word is coming from one of the help document. Okay, it is based on a schematic. Right, let's go ahead and run --help on it. I'm going to do ng generate --help, and I think it was already available over here. So the help output is saying app-shell, then application, class, component, directive, enum, guard, interceptor, interface library, module, pipe, and there are multiple other options. We can generate services as well. Now, because we want to generate a component, I'm going to say ng generate. Now, I'm not a lazy typer. That's why I'm going to type full word. If you don't want to type a lot like me, you can leave it to G. I don't like creating confusion, so I'm going to call ng generate. And over here, I'm going to choose an option of component. But then I just don't want to go ahead and create a component. I'm going to run hyphen hyphen help once again and see what options I have available. There's an option called hyphen hyphen flat. It says create the new files at the top level of the current project. Okay. Then it has hyphen force, which is going to override. Then it has inline styling, which is going to choose the style and not style URLs. Inline template, once again, template and not template URL. And then there's an option for module, right? You can link the component that you're creating to a specific module. If we go back to our Visual Studio Code and look at the modules that we have inside SRC, inside the app folder, we have the app module over here. And you can specify the project name, the selector that you want. If you don't specify these values, it is going to take the default value and it is going to spit out the code for that particular component. So let's go ahead and run this command ng generate. I'm going to say component. I'm going to give it a name. I don't know how to give a name. All right, so schematic is also going to take a name. So if I put a space and say product, I can leave it to product and then I'm going to use hyphen hyphen flat option. There is an option that ignores generating test cases as well. Inline, interactive, lint, module, project, skip import, skip selector, skip test. If you don't want to generate test cases, you're going to pass this option. I'm not going to pass it right now. In fact, let's not go ahead and pass this as well. And the flat option, let's just go ahead and put the hyphen hyphen module option and make it part of the app module. I'm going to hit enter. Once you do that, if everything is fine, it is going to create app product.component.ts file, number one. Number two, it is going to update the app module.ts file. Let's go back to our solution and see what modification happened here. In the declarations, when we first started the solution, we only had app component. With this new command run, we are seeing product component. Notice the command the parameter that we passed was product, but then the component itself that got created is product component. And this is where you have to understand two words. The first is configuration, and the second is uh, customization. So the word, okay, I'm so sorry. The first word is convention, and the second is configuration. Higher level programming languages like Angular and .NET, they rely on the conventions more. The convention here is that all the components, they are going to have component in their class names. All right. If you don't provide this, it is not going to break, but then the code that you are writing, it is going to become difficult to consume by other developers. Right. I'm not saying that it is going to get difficult for Angular framework itself. It is becoming difficult for other developers. And this is where convention is so important. Right. And then the second option is configuration. It is a combination of convention and configuration that we are using here. We are putting component in front in the component name, and we are configuring the declaration of those components, and we are mapping it to the app module using this syntax here. So in the product component, it generated this class, and then it also implemented something on init that we have not seen at the moment. But then there is a class that is added. It is modified with the export keyword. It is implementing something. Through on init, we have this function available, and there is an empty constructor also available. Once again, this component is modified with @component, which is an essential requirement if you are creating a component. Because we did not specify any prefix, we are seeing CS, which was created for the project, and then hyphen product because of the name. And the template, because we did not specify anything, it went ahead and selected the inline option. Because we did not provide any styling, it created the empty element. It is perfectly okay to delete this And you can once again change this to template URL, and it did not add any HTML file. I was hoping that it is going to add those files as well. Let's go ahead and add a file, app.component.html, and I want to drag it inside this folder. I'm going to choose the move option, and over here I'm going to say dot slash product.component.html, and the entire HTML of that component can go here. Let's go ahead and use the emit option for generating the UI. Div, and inside div I want say 5 element ul into 5. I'm going to hit the tab key, and all these 5 lines I'm going to type at the same time. I'm going to say product, hit the save button. All right, so what we have established in the whiteboard is we are going to avoid writing HTML code, and most of our code is going to look like some non-native tag like heading and filter and main. And inside these filter and main, we have already started creating these two components. But then inside these components, it is okay to have plain old HTML, right? And then this goes back to the theory of atomic design that we are already working at this level. But then deep inside, it is okay to have these atoms, right? And then we are putting exactly that in these components. And the app component can be accessed through specific routing. So give me one moment. We have added it to the declaration. The app component is defined here, and we go and run the application now. It's complaining that the app component.ts template URL is present product.component.html. Right, once again, it is saying that router outlet is not present. And then we know that the last time we resolved it is we added the browser component line. And once you add that, error occurs in the template of component this. Right. Ah, it's not a known element. And it resolved itself. We didn't do anything. I don't know why it's doing that. But now if we come to this page and we want to look at the product component, it is not allowing that. And for that, we'll require populating the router module. So once again, we are going to come to this section of ng module, and over here we have to add specific tags. Let me go ahead and add those next. All right, so instead of doing it that way, let's go ahead and inside component. Now, I don't want to use all this information, right? I'm because we are writing applications the Angular way, I'm going to remove this page from here, and I'm going to type cs-product over here like this, right? And now if I go back to the solution, so one component is using another component, right? In the app component.html, The regular HTML, I've removed that and I've added the CS product element over here. Right. This CS product is going to get me this particular HTML because I have defined the selector over here. And then this component is already registered with the module with this declaration here. So the import statement was added, number one, which is pointing to the component. A declaration was added, which is pointing to what we are going to use inside our application. And the app component, it was modified to, instead of plain HTML, for using uh, another one of our components. So these components, they are kind of linked now, right? So with that, it is already 10 on the clock. So let's end our session for today over here.